Hey everyone, welcome to the Pervasive Media Studio Lunchtime Talk. These talks are live every Friday at 1 p.m, both here in the building and online, so hello online people. Whether you're in Bristol or far away, you're very welcome. My name is Lawatim, I'm the studio coordinator, a black man in my early 30s wearing a black shirt and big thick glasses. If you don't know much about the Pervasive Media Studio, we're a diverse community exploring creative technology, a home for early creative ideas and companies, and a collaborative workspace offering events and opportunities. Every Friday, the Pervasive Media Studio throws open its doors and offers you the chance to spend time in the space. So come and join us here from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. every Friday. Feel free to move around, make a cup of tea if you want, grab a glass of water from the kitchen, it's just behind you. We have a quiet space just to the left of this space, to my left. And so if you need to take a break at any point, you're welcome to do so in there. Fire exits are at either end of the studio, and I'll put on my jacket and escort you out. We're not planning any fire alarms, so assume that it's real, and we will leave together. Accessible toilets and baby change can be found in the corridor next to the kitchen. So this week's talk is by Dr. Jess McCormack. Welcome, Jess. Jess is a lecturer in theatre and performance at the University of Bristol. Her current research focuses on collaborative performance practices, applied performance practices, and adaptation and translation for live and virtual reality or mixed reality performance. That is a lot. That's cool. In this talk, Jess is... all at different times, not all at once. In this talk, Jess is going to discuss and reflect on the first and second iteration of the Dancing Cities project, which brought together young people, facilitators, and VR filmmakers to experiment with co-creating 360-degree dancing postcards.
Thank you, Tim. Hi, everyone. I am a white woman in my late 30s with long, or shoulder length, just cut it, shoulder length, dark brown hair. So, yes, thank you for the introduction and the list of complex things that I work on, maybe at different times, maybe all together. But as Lautim said, I'm a lecturer at the university. As a lecturer, I spend most of my time with the students sort of exploring contemporary collaborative performance practices, applied performance practices, where we think about what it's like to make work with specific communities or for specific communities of people or groups of people. And then I also work a little bit with Helen Wilson, who's here, Paul Gluck, Francesco Bentavenia, who've all done previous lunchtime talks, I think, on the MA Immersive Arts, where I look at some examples of immersive dance performance projects as well. And today I'm going to be talking a little bit about this project, so called Dancing Cities, and there's a number of collaborators that have been involved in the project, so I'll talk about them as well. And thank you for having me, PM Studios and the Centre for Creative Technologies at University of Bristol, for inviting me to do this talk. It's really nice to come and be here. Normally I watch these talks at my desk up the hill in the Wickham Theatre, because I normally have a full day of teaching on a Friday, and I use this as my lunch break and eat my sandwiches while watching the talks, and it's been really nice. So it's really nice to be here. I was actually going to start with a really quick little creative task. I'm laughing now because I'm thinking we just talked about hiding at the sides or at the back. But this is going to be an invitation, and you can take part in sort of whichever way you want to. It'll be about 5 minutes, and people online, you can do it where you are. We won't be able to see you, but you can do it, or sip your tea or eat your sandwiches like I do and watch it happen. But part of this project that I'm going to talk about a little bit more is about, and extends my sort of general interest as a researcher, in the interplay between verbal language and movement, and how maybe those things can come together in different ways, or how starting with movement sometimes can be a way to think about things or talk about things in a new way or a different way. And I'm going to ask you just really quickly on your own to think about, and I'll explain and talk more about all of these things as I move through the talk, but just think about a place that you go to often, really often, a place that you choose to go to. So somewhere maybe you don't just pass through, but you choose to go there, and you go there often. Might be somewhere close to where you live. It might be somewhere close to where you used to live. It could be somewhere else, but somewhere you think you choose to go to often. So just have a think and choose a place. And then I'm going to ask you, and this is just an invitation, you don't have to do this if you don't want to, but I'm going to ask you to, just using your hands, try and give some kind of, if you can, and if you want to, one movement that you think describes something or tells us something about how that place makes you feel. So it might be, I'm thinking about my place, and mine might be really simple, that my place sort of makes me feel a bit like that. An invitation, take 60 seconds on your own, have a play with your hands, try and find something that you think expresses how that place makes you feel. Thank you. And then, if you, again, feel happy to, it's an open invitation, could you turn to the person next to you? If you don't want to, that's absolutely fine. There's someone behind you there. One person is going to show the other person their movement without talking about your place at all or actually speaking at all to each other. And people at home, you can sort of perform this by yourself and think about what that, what response might be. I'll talk in a minute. So one person is going to show, and the other person is going to instantly give a little response, as if they're saying, oh, having watched you tell me how that place makes you feel, I think that place makes you feel a bit like this. And it might be, like in response to my one, if my one was like this, it might be something quite similar. It might be a similar gesture, or it might be something new that's just like, I think it makes you feel a bit like this. Try not to give it too much thought, but you're trying to listen to that person, see what it makes them feel like, and you're giving a response. I think you're saying it makes you feel like this through one gesture. Thank you. People online, you could give a response to yourself. Lovely. Thank you. And now, and I promise it's nearly the end of the dancing part, now what you're going to do, again, no sort of verbal discussion of anything, you're going to try and choreograph something, create a little hand dance together that combines the first person's presentation and the second person. So mine might, if I was working with my partner, it might have been, that's the beginning, and that's the second bit, and that's the full dance. So from there, and you're going to perform it together. So just 60 seconds to work on that. People online, you could do your explanation, your imagined response, choreograph that into a sequence, or you can sit and drink your tea. Okay. Do we have any one brave partnership who would like to share theirs? Yes. Thank you.
Do you want to come to the front?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, people, I was going to check that online. Oh, yeah. So they're just going to share it. Yeah. Thank you very much. Can you show us your little choreography? Lovely. Thank you. Nice. Lovely. Now that you've had a little moment to explore that without talking to each other, can you take 30 seconds? Can the person who showed, can you tell your partner a little bit about what that place is, what it means to you, or just, and the other person can ask you any questions about it? Again, online people, you might want to just verbalise to yourself, if you're by yourself, what does that place mean to you now in words? Thank you. Oh. I'm going to cut you off just because I'm thinking about the online people who might not be having interesting dialogues with themselves or might be with their housemates. Thank you. So that's just a really quick and really simple sort of example, and I'll talk about later in some of the process that we've used in this project. And like I said, that's something, the interplay between movement and verbal language and dialogue, so people talking to each other, is something I'm really interested in. And I'm interested in the idea of translation, that we might sometimes translate between what we think about or a place, and how do we translate that into movement, or how do we think about verbalizing something and translate that, and then how do we translate from movement to verbal language. And also, lots of my work I'm thinking about, so Akram Khan, who's a choreographer, in conversation with Roy and Mitra, who's a dance studies scholar, said that dance is a form that can connect people at a level beyond oral language. And I'm interested sometimes in how starting with movement and not verbal dialogue might then be a way into a sort of nuanced dialogue about something. So maybe you did, and it looked like you went into good dialogue there. And maybe that process would have been really different if I just asked you to talk to each other straight away about what that place meant to you, rather than sort of to come at it from a movement perspective first and then think about talking after. A very simple, very short example of that, but just thinking about that. How do we communicate through movement, and how might we start with movement as a communication sometimes before we enter into dialogue, or move between the two? So I'll go in to talk a little bit more about the Dancing Cities project now. So nearly 2 years ago now, we worked with on a really small pilot project. And I worked with Helen Wilson from Rise Youth Dance, who's the director of Rise Youth Dance, an organisation that works with young people across the city. We just worked with 4 young people from the youth company, and we worked with VR filmmaker, documentary filmmaker Aayush Dudhiya. And we just had a couple of days to work together, and we explored what creative possibilities were opened up or explored, or what the young people could explore by working with the 360-degree camera on site, making site-responsive dance performances. So we were interested in exploring how that process of coming together to choreograph, to co-create immersive dance films, we might find and explore new ways for people to come together to think about how we use the city, how other people use the city, and to think about future possibilities of how we might use the city in the future. I'll explain a little bit more about those ideas and why we were interested in some of those things in a second. I'm just going to show this. So choreographer and dancer Yaakov Shreer explains that for him, when working with immersive technologies and dance or performance, he likes to look at technologies enabling you to build a world, a space, that once you participate in it, you find yourself new ways to behave in it. So as part of this project, we were just working with quite simple immersive technology. So we're just working with a 360-degree camera and thinking about creating films for people to watch via headsets or online where they can scroll around. And obviously there's lots of complex technology, creative technologies that sort of have maybe more opportunities for the audience to have a bit more of like agency and engagement or impact, or move around the space a bit more impact. But for this, we were just sort of interested in looking at the simple technology of the 360-degree camera and thinking about exploring what that meant for going to a site and looking at it in a different way, in a sort of technology responsive way. So throughout the project, we're interested in this idea, idea of bringing people together into a chosen site, and I'll talk a little bit more about what that is in a second, to collaborate with the 360-degree camera and to create a space to explore or play and maybe find new ways to explore or behave in these places. And throughout the project, we did see lots of examples of young people play with choreographic and compositional choices in these environments, engage with these environments in new ways, and they told us after that it was in really new ways. And so in a simple way, we were just experimenting with what the specific creative technology gave them as a way to explore that place in a new way. I'm going to start to talk a little bit about where the beginnings of the project went, and then talk a little bit about the next stage, which we've just finished last week, and we were just filming with about 50 young people aged 13 to 19 around the city, and we've just made some new postcard films. But I'm going to go back 2 years or longer first to talk about where it sort of started. So in 2017, the Runnymede Trust published a report that named Bristol as one of the most diverse and one of the most segregated cities in the UK. So it's one that has, a rich diversity of communities and people, yet they found to be really segregated. And that report has, really interesting findings in lots of different areas, but that was the one thing that stood out to me. And in response to that, you might remember, if some of you were in the city at the time, Bristol Vic, Ujima Radio and Bristol Post came together and they held a series of city conversations. They invited Bristol residents to come together to discuss what they called this divided city. And the first of these 3 city conversations were held at schools in different areas of Bristol. And then the last one was held at Bristol Vic in the main performance space. And so I went to these events, and the first section of each of these events were young people from the school talking about the city, sort of their response to that Runnymede Trust report. And the young people spoke a lot about how they sort of saw a divided city, and they agreed that it was. They spoke about their feelings of using only specific parts of the cities. There's one young person who spoke live at one of the events who talked about sort of feeling like they only belonged or could only use a certain time, like it was a certain space in the city, like they had a marking or a piece of string that was sort of like, this is my part of the city and I'm not sure if I can step over it. And lots of the young people in those sort of openings talked about how they would really welcome the opportunity to meet young people from other parts of the city and to sort of be the people who sort of disrupt that segregation, and they were really keen to explore and meet other people. So Bristol is of course not unique in being a city that has patterns of segregation. There's a significant body of research from scholars located in social psychology, geography, and lots of other disciplines that have found that segregation is an issue faced in cities around the world. Schreiber and Alexander, and I've just got a quote here, so working in this field, remind us that socioeconomic polarization and spatial segregation have become prevailing trends in cities worldwide, with, of course, adverse impacts on quality of life. There's also this body of research that's emerging from social psychology that has begun to focus on how adolescents are a particular group that are aware of and can interrupt or possibly disrupt these patterns of segregation in society. So, for example, the work of social psychologist Shelley McEwen-Jones, who's worked a little bit in the second stage of this project, Laura Taylor, Patricia Guerin, they've all explored the role that young people might play in bridging divides in urban settings, and have argued that adolescents as a particular group are more likely to disrupt those established patterns of segregation. Perhaps they're more likely to challenge stereotypes, and also they're more likely to encourage other members of their family or community to challenge stereotypes or disrupt patterns of segregation as well, or to challenge prejudice when it pops up. So within this body of research, the promotion of empathy and understanding has been identified as an important part of promoting pro-social behaviour towards different communities. What the project partners and I were sort of interested in the beginnings stages of talking about this project were the ideas that sort of groups of young people living in cities might be able to interrupt these patterns of segregation, and what might arts practices be able to offer that. I'm going to go back. So thinking about approaching this project, and this sort of comes out from my previous research on site-specific performance practices and collaborative and co-creative practices and lots of experience of, so my background is a community dance artist before I came into academia. I worked as a community dance artist across a number of settings and did a lot of work with young people as well. So sort of thinking about approaching this project with Fran Levy's understanding that words alone are not enough to express the totality of experience, and in line again with Akram Khan's statement that dance is a form that might connect people at a level beyond oral language, I started to think about how we might be able to invite people to choreograph and dance together as a way of exploring and communicating what different city spaces meant to them as a starting point for the project. So I also started to talk with Helen Wilson, who's the director of Rise Youth Dance, and someone who works with a large number of young people across the city. And we talked about the project that could invite young people to be involved, to explore their relationships to a place using a combination of verbal and non-verbal methods. And the project aimed to explore the possibilities for a community-engaged creative project involving immersive dance, practice to deepen the young people's understanding of each other's experience of place, to invite new ways to imagine how we might engage with the city, and to invite people to come together and imagine possibly a better model for navigating our shared city spaces. And we spoke to young people, and I spoke to a group of young people I was working with at the time. This idea emerged about this idea of being able to send a postcard. So to send a postcard from one part of their city, so sort of that they felt connected to, and to be able to share that with young people living across the city in another part that maybe didn't know that place was there, or didn't feel confident to go there, or just didn't know about it. And then we talked about sort of different technologies and what might be interesting. And the young people were really interested in this idea of making something for a VR headset, where they talked about that sort of idea of like inviting someone into that space and sharing it in a particular way. Gideon Obazanik, who has said this. So just thinking about working with immersive technologies, and dance has said that it's even closer than live performance, or it can get you there, because you are actually in it and people are whizzing past you or hurtling towards you and moving away. One of the things I enjoy most about watching dance in the real world is being in the dance studio and being really close to it. So this is something that the young people were really excited about when we were working with them on the project, that they were making something that people were watching at the centre of it. And they were really excited about this idea of it being like someone could step into the dance studio. So rather than someone watching their work from far away, they would be in the centre of it. And they were really excited about exploring the possibilities of like rushing past people, or running towards people, or getting really close to people, or playing with where people might be looking in the space as well. So the first pilot project, like I said, was just really quick. We got a tiny bit of funding and we had 2 days to work together and play together, and we created, we just worked with 4 young people. 2 of them chose a city location, and we made the first 2 dancing postcards. And I'm just going to share with you one of the ones that came out of that. And this was a young person called Krish, who chose a space in Purdown.
I have a very personal connection with this place. It's kind of like the basis of where I've grown up outside of my home, and it's a safe space for me. During high school, no one really went to house parties, so we'd just like bring speakers up and sit on the top of the bunker, or like even when I come with groups, I like to sometimes be on my own and just like hang out in the area. And it's such a big area. It's not just like one set place. There's so many different variations of the space. You can see it from like miles away, but then no one ever really comes and like explores the place. I think people should do that more. Hopefully in the future I can come back to this place and it stays the same, or if it doesn't and it changes, that's great as well, because it's always good to see progress. I'd like to show people that I meet in the future this place, because it just means a lot to me. And I just hope that they can find the same connection that I find with this place. I'm Krish, I live in Ashley Down, and I'm a dancer with the Rise Youth Dance.
So that was one of the first sort of postcards that we made in that initial pilot project. And we made those 2 postcards and then we shared them with loads of young people. So then lots of people watched it and we captured a little bit of information from young people about their experience of watching the postcards. And I think on reflecting on the project, we realized that it was like these 2 days working with the people on site filming that loads of interesting dialogue happened, when it was actually in that process of someone inviting someone, like us all meeting at the place that the person had located, looking around it together, and those young people following a process a little bit like what we just did at the beginning, where they explored physically without talking about what that place meant to them. They did lots of choreography together and dancing together before they then talked about anything. And exploring that, we found that that was the really interesting part. And it was also interesting sharing those postcards with other people, and I'll show you some of the things that young people have said after. But it was sort of that bit that was really interesting. And so we then talked about, and we worked with the young people who worked on it, to think about how we could extend that into sort of a larger project. And so this year we worked with about 50 young people, and then we're hoping that then this is still in the early stages of sort of playing with ideas. We're hoping that we will make a model that then can sort of go to different schools, and we'll make a model that might be able to be used with lots more young people. But our focus for this next stage of the project has sort of been to carry on exploring the creative process, to find out about the young people's experience of that, and to look at how we're sort of developing that technology responsive and site responsive performance practices. And we're also, with this project, so we've just finished filming last week and we've made 5 new postcards. We're going to be sharing those postcards with lots more young people around the city and collecting their experience of watching that as well. And this time we brought together lots more collaborators on the project as well. And I know that's something that's important to the PM studios, that sort of commitment to making time for collaboration. And for me, really, the most interesting thing about working on this project was just bringing lots of different people together. And we tried to make time just to explore that process together and see what emerged and see what comes out of that collaboration. So we collaborated with 50 young people, this time from Rise Youth Dance and BSA, and Helen Wilson, the director of Rise Youth Dance, and Imogen Sampson from BSA as well. And that course, it's a level 3 college dance course that runs in collaboration with Rise Youth Dance. Those people, the young people in Rise Youth Dance, sort of live in lots of different parts of the city. And Rise, as a company, they used to run lots of their youth dance sessions in the centre of town. And a couple of years ago, they sort of made the decision to go out further in. So they work in a hub in Lockleys and somewhere in South Bristol and centrally as well. And they sort of bring their older dancers together, but they also have different places. And they also work in community centres and schools around the city as well. So they already, as a collaborator on the project, have a real interest in bringing young people together from all parts of the city. We worked with Aayush Dudhiya, who is the documentary filmmaker, VR filmmaker, who mainly works with wildlife films, but has done a little bit of work with Brooke Tate in Bristol Vic and has made some work. And this connection came, I was talking to Dan Canham, who's a dance artist and filmmaker in Bristol, and I was saying that I'd started playing with some 360 filmmaking myself, just with a cheap and cheerful camera. And Dan put me in touch with Aayush, who'd been doing a little bit of work with an artist in Bristol. But it's really interesting, and this collaboration is interesting because Aayush has a particular interest in how the relationship between VR films and the experience of someone watching something through a headset or a particular VR film, and the relationship between that and environmental activism or environmental action. And he's really interested in this idea of why VR might be a particular way to sort of show other people's positions or viewpoints of a place. For this collaboration, we also worked with Sam Amos from Trash Dollies, who's a dance filmmaker and choreographer based in Bristol. And some of you who arrived a bit early, you see some of the sort of shots of the process happening. Sam, for this stage, has made a sort of backstage documentary of the process as it's happening as well, which has been great. And then we worked with dance artists. So Shadiamond, Krish and Amali were the young people who worked with us on the first postcards. And it was really lovely. For this project, they came back and worked on the project as dance facilitators. So now they're in training or just graduated their training and working as dancers. And then we were also joined with Hannah and Olive. So we had 4, we were calling them young facilitators, but they, brilliant dance facilitators who worked with the young people on the project as well, because we were working with a larger number of young people. And then for this part of the project as well, Shelley McEwen Jones, who's a professor of social psychology and who has a real interest in and research focus on sort of understanding improving intergroup relations. And she has a background, lots of research done in Northern Ireland and looking at particular settings, but thinking about how groups of people might, better improve their dialogue. And Kirsty Sedgman, who works with me in the Department of Theatre, who is a doctor of audiences and thinks about people's experience of things. So this has been really great. In this stage of the project, Shelley and Kirsty have been helping me to think about how we might capture the young people's experience, both of taking part in the project and making the films, and also the young people who are going to watch the film. So we're hoping that hundreds of young people are going to watch the postcards, and they're helping me to think about sort of creative ways that we can capture the young people's experiences of that and see if there is anything in this idea that sharing this knowledge or understanding people's experience of city place might encourage people to use the city in new ways. I'm just, as I talk a little bit about the creative process, I'm going to let this play in the background. And this is just, some of the footage from Sam Amos. And this shows where we went and some of the things we did. And so B, a young person, chose this location, which is the Brunel Way pump track, sort of towards South Bristol from Hot Wells. And then Maya, who chose this place in Lee Woods. And then you'll see the other locations, Akira, who chose Dundridge Park in St George. And then G, who chose and took us to Boiling Wells in St Werburgh's. And then, where did we go last? Anouk took us to Greenbank Cemetery in Easton. So the 5 young people chose a location, and then we took a group of young people who lived sort of not near there, or some of them, it was sort of a mixture. Some of them had never been to those places before, maybe some of them had passed through, maybe a couple of people knew it was a bit of a mixture, but definitely some people had never been. We took them to those locations, and then they started this creative process where the person who chose the location made a solo about how that place made them feel, why it was important to them, why they thought that place was important. So that was different to each of them. They made a solo about that and they shared that with everyone else. Everyone else sort of watched that and made some movement in response, just like I asked you to do at the beginning. It was like this process of listening through movement. So they made something that was about how it made them feel. They shared it, the other people made something back that was like, I think you're saying this. They then choreographed some material together. And then the young person who chose the space looked around, showed people around, and chose locations that they thought might be interesting to capture. And they then thought about how they would like to capture that movement in relation to the 360-degree camera. So they were always thinking about, and they were always talking about that audience being right there. Like, how do we want to come up, and do we want to try, and they talked a lot about wanting to like shift the audience, or wanting the audience to like follow them somewhere. So they wanted the person watching to want to turn around and capture the movement or follow the movement. They did a lot of things where they wanted to like surprise people and be sort of hidden and suddenly come out. So they were really playing with like that technology responsive ideas of how they would explore the space. And it was really interesting to see them do that. And then we've collected some survey material after as well, and they talked about it, how they talked about, oh, I've never, even if the person who knew the space really well, this has given me a completely different way to be in the space, to look at the space. And the people who were shown around, some of which were really nervous and apprehensive about going to new places. So the people who chose the location, especially the two that chose the first two locations, they were really nervous, and they felt this huge weight of responsibility about sort of inviting people to a new place, because some people were like, I have to travel far, people were apprehensive about going to a new place, they didn't know this part of the city. And so there was a level of sort of nervousness in the beginning, but then it was really nice, luckily, in all of the locations to see that disperse, and to see people go up to that person and be like, oh, I know I gave you a hard time this morning when I was on the bus coming here, but actually this is great and it's lovely being here. And they all talked about this, working with the camera, sort of giving them a different way to look at the space, be in the space. And it made a really playful atmosphere. So the first group we went with were a group of college students, and in the lunch break that they had there, so we had a whole day on site, in the lunch break they started playing hide and seek. And they had this excellent long game of hide and seek in the space. And I was sort of talking to them after about if that's like a usual activity for them. And they said, no, not at all. But I think it was something about that like process, that they were really playful in the space. And when they were dancing with the site and with each other, they just wanted to sort of keep exploring. Right, I will speed through. So we have collected, so again, this is just like the beginning part of this project, and we're still exploring like what it could be, what the collaboration can be, how the young people and the young people's experience of it. This is just a few things. So this is from the first pilot project when we shared the two first postcards with lots of people. These are some of the things that the young people said about watching the postcards. So they hadn't been involved in the process at all. They were just watching the postcards on the headsets. And there's some interesting things that people said. I mean, lots about really liking just being there and looking around. But there's interesting things, like someone said, I feel like I was getting to know that person. We've shared these postcards now with loads of people. And I don't want to make a generalization, but it's really interesting so we've shared it with lots of different ages, different places. When the young people, so sort of the teenagers are wearing it, they're quite interactive. And actually some of them, because they knew some of the dancers, as soon as they watch it and that person comes there, they're like, hi, they sort of talk to the person and they start dancing with them. But some people who don't know the people have done that as well. And that's been really nice to see. But that's, some of the interesting things they said about watching it. And then now we've just done this second part of the project. We've collected some sort of survey data and talking to the young people about their experience. These are just some of the things which I've pulled out that have been interesting that they've said. So one of the questions on the survey that we gave them was, in what ways, if any, did taking part in this project make you think about the places you currently use in Bristol, or how this might change in the future? And some of the things they've said, so I think I could go to more places. Me and my family could go to new areas to explore. I like this. I was worried about the vibe. I didn't know the place or have friends there, but the vibes were good. And then there's just been a sort of, a really positive response to this, of people thinking about different places. And it was really nice to hear when we were there, like people going like, oh, I'm definitely going to come back here. When we were at one of the places, someone said, like, I'm going to bring my family here tomorrow. On the Sunday, we were there on the Saturday. And then lots of people saying things like, it's really encouraged them to think about going to new places. And these are other things. So we've got lots of questions on the survey which we're sort of collecting, like why, how often, and some young people already use the city and use the whole city, but some people really don't. And some people, we've collected some of that information now, and I've just had a look at the initial sort of data that we've got in. Lots of people say that in general in everyday life they're not using places sort of beyond their neighbourhood, but they would really like to, and they'd be really interested to. And then just one more thing we showed them, I asked them if you were to describe to a friend what it was like to make a dancing postcard, what would you say? And then I've pulled out some of the interesting things that people have said. It's exciting, all of us meeting together and learning about a new place all together. Happy, fun and inclusive, fun and eye-opening. This is interesting, someone's described it as finding out about a new place with the VR camera. And yeah, talked about it's a good way to sort of come together and explore the city. So that's really interesting to see. Yes, so thank you for listening. And this is just the start. Again, we're still exploring and we're still sort of growing the project, but I'm really excited to sort of delve into the data that we've collected from the young people so far about if being part of a project like this does make them think about how they use the city now, how they might use it in the future, and if there's anything, here that might be interesting in sort of giving opportunities to interrupt or disrupt those patterns of segregation that might have been really formed in this city of Bristol. Thank you.
All right, it's now question time. So if anyone has any questions from the room, raise your hand. If you're online, my colleague Emma will be your voice in the room. So just type it into the chat and let rip. I need to go get the mic. Wait right there. I'm coming. There you go.
Hi. That was really great. I really loved watching them engaging with your processes.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's really neat.
Oh, you're muted.
You have to say it all over again.
Yeah, good. Okay, go again.
Hi.
Seriously, thanks.
Shall I repeat the bit about how much I enjoyed it and watching the young people in those spaces? I was quite interested in sort of working with young people before. Mm-hmm. Do you get a sense of, are there spaces in Bristol that they see as neutral spaces that are safe for everyone, or are all spaces in Bristol places they think belong to other people?
That's really interesting, and it has, so hearing them talk and talking to young people now throughout these different stages of the project, lots of people do talk about the centre of town as feeling like a space that does belong to everyone. Or they might say like, oh no, I just stick to my neighbourhood apart from when I go shopping in town. Or actually we talked a lot about IKEA also being a space that they all used and went to. So that was another neutral. Yeah, exactly. IKEA and Primark came up a lot, which is really interesting. Yeah, and it was really interesting that those spaces that make everyone feel welcome in some way. But then, so then they talked a lot about, like, there's those spaces and then there's other spaces that might be really near to where they live actually, but it's like on the border of a neighbourhood or just a bit where their school is or sort of they are used to or their family knows or, so then I think there's lots of people who feel like these divides are really there. But then, of course, that's not all young people, and some young people feel like, actually, no, I do this already. I go and I use the city, and because I've made friends in different places. And lots of the data that we're getting back in the surveys as well is some people are saying that most times they use a different space or travel to different spaces for something like a art club or a music club or something. So some kind of club that's taking them out, but then they'll talk about how that then makes them much more confident and they now use the city in a different way. Thank you.
Anyone else? Any more questions?
Well, I've got the privilege of talking about this with you more, Jess, but thank you for sharing that. I suppose I was wondering for the first time about the idea of like 15-minute neighbourhoods or like local and local places like that. And Bristol seems like a really great city to kind of embrace that more local living where you can live in a more kind of sustainable or circular way, maybe. But perhaps, one of the sort of shames of that is that you might not get to know other areas. So I wonder if you'd looked at that at all, or if that's come into the research.
Yeah, and we thought about that. Thank you, Harry. Really interesting question. There's already, just in the sort of 50 young people that we have taken part and filled in these surveys already, we've got a question about sort of how there's a series of statements, and one of them is people in Bristol from different neighbourhoods sort of get on well or mix and get on well something. And that score on most people, the sort of average score is really low. And then there's another question about people in my neighbourhood get on well or have a strong sense of community. There's a couple of questions there, and those scores are really high. So that's really, and that sort of has made us as a sort of project team think about that as well, that people have this strong sense of community where they are, and that's obviously, there's loads of positives that come with that, and like you said, that sort of sustainability, being near everyone, having access to things that they need near them as well. That's come up in dialogue with young people, sort of saying, I don't go out my neighbour because we have this and have this, and other young people saying, we don't have that anymore. We don't have a youth centre anymore, we don't have a cinema near us, we don't have a swimming pool near us anymore. So some people do and some people don't. So I guess that idea of that sort of 15-minute, that everyone has what they need near them, is obviously, there's loads of positives in there. But then that sort of, I just think back to those young people who talked in the beginning about like that sort of like string around them and feeling like then I can't step over. So I guess there's a really interesting dialogue and tension there between that idea of everyone having what they need near them, but then also feeling like they can and are welcome to go into other places. Thank you.
Hello.
Hello.
Thank you, it's really great.
Thank you.
One thing I was considering with the VR camera, do you always have it static?
Not always, but mainly. 90% of the time, yes. So it has moved a little bit, and we've experimented, with the young person sort of like taking it a little bit on. But I think it is something that we could explore much more. Did you have ideas about that?
I don't know if you know the band Jungle, but they all have brilliant music videos, and the dancers really engage with the camera, and then sometimes they kind of lead it through into another room, things like that. And I wonder if that would be, the next level of engagement, because if I imagine, wearing a headset and being in the middle of people dancing around me, but I'm completely rigid still, it's maybe slightly like an awkward experience, whereas if you're sort of drawn in and you almost feel like you're part of it. I don't know, people might even dance with the headset on and join in. Yeah,
absolutely. And that's one thing that in the project that we made, so the young person Maya chose Lee Woods, lots of that, just as we were following their sort of lead, and she was taking them around loads of places, taking the group that came with her and showing them around, and we wanted to capture that, so we did capture some of that travelling with, but I think absolutely yes. And there's just issues with the technology there of some people feeling that sort of motion sickness or disengaging when it moves too much. So I did feel that tension, because it sort of feels like I want to capture that feeling of them exploring the space, which is it's like that moment when we first arrive on site and that young person gets to show everyone else around and point things, and sort of that's the most exciting bit. And I think that could be captured in that way a bit more with that moving around. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I've got a question from online. Any thoughts about this being less structured? Wonder how you encourage that to happen outside a facilitated activity, or if that is desirable.
Yeah, definitely, really great question. Absolutely something I'm thinking about now. There's two parts of that question. The less structure, I think in this process where we worked, in the first process where I worked just with 4 young people, the actual creative structure was a lot more free, and we were playing and they were playing, and it was, whereas this, when we worked with a larger group of young people, and we only had half a day or a day to sort of make the postcard, I felt a real tension between that sort of pull of like thinking about making a final product, the young people, and they are making all the decisions on the day, so we don't pre-plan anything, but they're like making a shots list as we go in the space, so it's really about them deciding in the moment. But I know that by the end of the day we have to have shot this and this, and they have to have sort of done this. And I felt a real tension this time between that and wanting it to be a lot more free and maybe to let go of the idea of the final product, but lead into the process a little bit more. And then the second part of it.
Wonder how you encourage that to happen outside of facilitated activity, or if that's desirable.
Yes. So yeah, absolutely. Now we're in this stage of the project, I'm thinking about that sort of, if we were to build something bigger, how that would be absolutely like, this is a starting point, an invitation for a creative project, but it's actually about building something where we then sort of encourage people to do it on their own, outside of that, outside of making a product, a sort of finished film or something. But yeah, it being a creative project that's encouraging people to then, how they go on and use the city in general. Absolutely, definitely desirable.
Did you have one more?
No, I'll chat after.
Any more from the room?
I'll say, where can we watch your films?
Oh, thank you. They're going into post-production now, so they're not made yet, but they will have a YouTube channel, and I will make sure that can I send that link around?
Yeah,
So yes, I will. Yeah, I can't wait to see them on the, after they've been on the edit table and finished. But yeah, they're just going into post-production now. Thank you.
Any more questions? No? All right, I think that's it.
Thank you.
If you want to stick around and chat to Jess or Hot Desk or whatever, please do. You can come and find myself or Emma for any more information about the Pervasive Media Studio. And if you have any more questions online, studio@watershed.co.uk. Thanks, Jess.
Thank you.